Moving right ahead, the next policy up for consideration is recommended draft policy, ARIN 2015-7, simplified requirements for demonstrated need for transfers. This was proposed in June of 2015 as ARIN Policy Proposal 221. The AC Shepherds are Robert Seastrom and Milton Mueller. It's been presented at 2 public policy meetings and 1 public consultation. It was revised in June 2016. The ARIN Advisory Council recommended it for adoption in September, meaning that it could be advanced to last call after this meeting. The text is in the discussion guide and online. Okay, our staff understanding. The policy allows a requesting organization to demonstrate need by having an officer of the requesting organization attest that they will use at least 50% of the aggregated IPv4 addresses, including the requested resources and all previously held resources, on an operational network within 24 months. For 8384, staff would no longer conduct a needs assessment of the requested IP block size per NRPM Section 4 and would accept the officer attestation as full justification for the requested block size. Staff comments. We would apply this to the assessments for 8384 and transfer pre-approval requests. It could be implemented as written. No material legal issue exists if the policy is adopted. Comment from council. Permitting recipient resources based solely on attestation of an officer permits some amount of fraud as it enables those willing to make a fraudulent statement to obtain resources. The present combination of officer attestation and staff verification provides a stronger assurance of compliance with the policy intent. The policy would have a minimal resource impact on ARIN from an implementation aspect. We'd update the staff guidelines and internal procedures and staff training. And that ends the staff introduction. I'll now have Rob Seastrom come up and give the presentation.
Thank you, John. So this is 2015-7, Simplified Requirements for Demonstrated Need for IPv4 Transfers. As everyone is no doubt aware, the current policy for transfers inherits the demonstrated need requirements from Section 4 of the NRPM. That's centered around the notion of there being a free pool. There is no more free pool. So that was then, this is now. This is one of several proposals that we have in our docket that seeks to move this regime more in line with our current reality. The policy statement for 2015-7 is that we add a section to 8.1 that states the recipient of IPv4 number resources has the option to demonstrate need by having an officer of the requesting organization attest that they will use at least 50% of their aggregate IPv4 addresses, including the requested resources on an operational network within 24 months. By popular demand, based on discussions here at these meetings and on PPML, we have retained the option to use Section 4 criteria to demonstrate need. To recap what John just presented in the overview, staff and legal, staff says we can do this as written. Staff says that officer attestation will be accepted as full justification for the requested IPv4 block size. Council points out that this constitutes an increased risk of fraud. Do you support this policy as written, and what do you think of it vis-a-vis the other 3 policies that are on our docket that deal with similar problems?
Yeah, a little easier here. Okay, microphones are open for the discussion of this proposal. Same deal as last time. If we don't get input, it's hard for the AC to do it. So, center front microphone, please.
Excellent. My name is Allison Wood, and I work for the state of Oregon, and I'm also a candidate for the Advisory Council. I do support this policy as written, but I do have some concerns over the fraudulent pieces and how the enforcement and auditing of those allocations will be monitored by ARIN.
Is there specific? Oh, okay.
So if this policy is implemented, the ARIN's enforcement would be moved entirely to a after-the-fact basis based on fraud reporting. So we would have a circumstance where if someone thought there was a material omission from someone, thought that in fact an organization made a statement that was actually inaccurate and wasn't using the addresses or used them, ended up doing something else with them, and they knew that at the time they made their attestation, someone could submit a fraud report to ARIN. We have a number of resources fraud reporting page on the website. We would investigate that. It is possible for us to turn around and if we believe that there's been a material misrepresentation, we can pursue that both by reclamation of the block and or by fraud proceedings, criminal proceedings. So but we would have no way of doing that other than if the community brought it to our attention sometime afterwards.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Does that still, are you still in support?
I am still in support of this policy. Absolutely, always when there's simplification.
Okay, thank you. Stage left.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NRONC. I do not support this policy as written. There are no changes to this policy today that I would recommend to allow this policy to move forward. And I prefer any other of the transfer policies over this policy. And my reason is this. We already have officer attestation and transfers. It's just part and parcel of what ARIN does. The officer attestation is to say, yes, everything that we are giving you is legitimate. But the gate is that staff actually looks at the documentation that is given and says, this is a legitimate operational network. Without, you can put the words in that you're going to run it on an operational network and that you're going to do all of this stuff, but without any proof to ARIN, as simple as it may be, that's a whole different discussion, the level of proof that ARIN wants, but without any proof, we're really just gutting out needs and calling it officer attestation. Any of the other policies, I believe, today will improve the situation for companies looking to do transfers. This is the one policy that I do not feel comfortable with today. Come back to us in 2 or 3 or 4 years once we've had a much better show of how the transfer market is working. But that's my piece.
Thank you. Remote participation.
I believe this works, yes. Jason Schiller from Google and ASOAC says he opposes this. He says this would remove all verifiable criteria and simply requires an officer attestation that the proposed usage of the IP space in 2 years might happen, even if it doesn't materialize. This is not only abused by fraud, but also by overly simplistic goals. I lament the lack of a recommended draft for policy proposal 2016-3, which adequately simplifies need without eviscerating it.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for submitting while you're under the weather, and we hope you feel better soon. So, center microphone.
Hi there, Donna Roisman with SoftLayer. I'd be remiss to mention that we have 4 varying policies talking about adjusting needs for Section 8. Just wanted to make sure for folks who didn't have it at the forefront of their minds, 2 years ago, 2015-9 was proposed that simply eliminated all needs-based assessment for transfers. I was the author of that. I just want people to consider we can hem and haw and chew over 4 very versions of this of a similar issue, which is simplifying needs, justification for transfers, and I would really love it if we could move forwards and just say none of this is necessary. We're working way too hard, and we just need to move forwards and eliminate needs-based like what was done in RIPE. That being said,
continue, please.
Specific to 2015-7, I'm still on the fence as to which of the 4 which is the least evil of the 4. But 2015-7, anything that simplifies and ridiculously simplifies to the point of, I'm going to assign a letter, now let me get on with my transfer, I'm a huge fan of. If that's all I need to do, especially since 2015-7 specifies it's not just the new address space that has to be utilized, but all of the address space in aggregate. So as I understand it correctly, let's say, for example, I have a /16, and I'm using 95% of it, and I'm trying to get myself a /17, so half of that. So that means in total aggregate, I'm already way over 50%. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in that case, where I'm at 95% of my /16, I need to get a /17, I can easily say, of course I'm planning on using 50% of my entire aggregate because I'm already using it. Is that right?
Yes, if I'm still able to do subnetting correctly, that's correct.
Okay, cool. Okay, well then, yeah, in that case, I do support at least the effort being made here to significantly simplify the transfer process. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Center rear microphone.
Yes, I'm Milton Mueller. I'm on the AC. I support this policy, but rather than having another AC member give you his opinion, I just wanted to clarify what I think are some misunderstandings that continually recur around the discussion of this policy. In particular, those misunderstandings were evident in what Kevin was saying. Essentially, the mistake that's being made consistently is that people are applying free pool criteria to market transfers. And they're saying, we're going to have all this fraud if people can get these addresses without actually proving need in the traditional sense. And what people seem to be consistently forgetting are two things. Number one, they're paying for these addresses. They're not just getting them for free. Okay, and number two, why are we concerned about needs assessment? Actually, we aren't any longer concerned about needs per se. We're concerned about whether these are in operational networks or not. And so, what is the issue with proving that they are operational networks? In effect, people are concerned about massive kinds of speculation taking place if we don't have needs assessment. Maybe that's a valid concern, maybe it's not. But the point is, if you're going to engage in massive speculation, the officer at a station is sufficient to prevent that. If you are going out and getting gigantic numbers of address blocks and then simply reselling them, or that you don't really need them, it will be extremely obvious, I think, to ARIN, and I think it will be obvious to the community, and people can report that. If it is minor, if you're using 40% instead of 50%, do we really care? Remember, they're paying for the addresses. So let's have a reasonable discussion about what's actually being proposed here, which is, as the previous speaker just said, a massive simplification of the process of market transfers. And we are not giving away addresses for free. They are being paid for, and very few people are going to go around paying for addresses that they have absolutely no use for. And if they are lying about the fact that it's an operational network and it's doing it on a large enough scale for it to matter, I think that will be obvious. So please have a real debate about what this is proposing.
Thank you, Milton. Just a small admin, we're running a tiny little bit behind. That's okay, and we want to make sure everyone has a chance to comment. But for my time management, if you do wish to comment on this policy, would you mind approaching a mic? I realize you got to wait a little bit, but I would appreciate that, just so I have kind of a handle on how many more people would like to speak. Center front.
Owen DeLong, Akamai ARIN Advisory Council. Yes, let's have a reasonable discussion about what's actually being proposed here. What is being proposed here is that without limitation, as often as you want, simply on the basis of an officer being willing to sign a piece of paper that says, I think I can probably use half of the total space within 24 months, you can get double what you currently have. So let's say you start with a 12 and you think you can use half of a 11 by the end of 24 months, and a month later you think you can use half of a 10, and a month later you think you can use half of a 9 within 24 months. You can actually parlay that month after month into a pretty large block on repeated officer attestations without any real necessary ability to prove that you can actually use that within the 24 months. This is a wide open policy allowing you to do whatever you're willing to attest you might think you might be able to do in 24 months, and to consume as much space on that basis as you would like, as long as you're willing to pay for it. I do not believe that dollars as the only modulator on fraud is a good solution, and I do not support this policy.
Owen, May I offer a friendly amendment to your statement?
Possibly.
Since you had a coda that you don't believe the dollars are the only moderator, yet you used the verb get. May I point out that since you're talking about 9s, 10s, and 11s, that you're well into the 7-digit mark on your budget, and that you have to answer to that to the officer of the company who signs it.
Completely understand, and I think that there are a few different environments where I could see acquiring that large of a block of space just to deprive it from my competitors would be potentially justifiable.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to ask if all future participants can keep their comment to about a minute or under, and that way we can be not too far over time. So with that, right, left microphone.
Joe Provo, Google, also an AC candidate. I'll be very brief. My colleague, Mr. Schiller, has pretty much provided decent detail that I don't disagree with. And out of the 4, I oppose this policy as written and prefer one we will be discussing later.
Thank you. Front microphone.
Chris Woodfield, Twitter, AC candidate. My reservations about the policy as written, I realize I'm fifth to the mic, so a lot of my concerns have already been voiced, is the fact that any enforcement of any misrepresentation is entirely up to the community. If ARIN had some mechanism for proactive retrospectives on these transfers to make sure that a year later that the space is being used as advertised, that would allay many of my concerns around this policy.
Thank you. John Kern.
The only reason that ARIN would go back and look at transfer after the fact would be if that organization came in with a subsequent transaction. Obviously, as part of that, we would be doing it. But otherwise, we're not in a position to even have the information necessary to do what you ask. It would really need to be either as a result of a resource review triggered by fraud report or as a result of the organization coming back in.
Thank you. We're going to close the microphones after left microphone's comment, so please approach a microphone or start typing feverishly if you'd like to be included. Left microphone.
So Kevin Bloomberg. 2 things. The first is don't appreciate the personal attack. Would prefer that we keep this to the policy and not to people's intelligence. The second part is that once something is approved, once it is done, i.e., once the community's will has been taken care of, it is now under RSA. And what is allowed under RSA versus what we think as the community we can do is a very different scenario. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, it is very difficult unless there is blatant fraud to revoke space. RSA is a contractual document that makes it significantly more difficult than just rewriting a policy.
I would actually not agree with that characterization. Because of the fact that both the RSA contains language that would trigger on a fraudulent representation, and our policy has a very clear resource review. If there is misrepresentations to ARIN, we're extremely well set up to recover the address space. And so I have no concern about that aspect if there's a case where there's a clear misrepresentation. The problem that we'll have, and there is a problem, but I want to characterize it differently, is a business anticipates using something within 2 years, and then 8 months later goes through a change of business plan. It's next to impossible to refute their statement that they had a need and no longer do. And so it's not that we're not equipped. In the case of someone who's truly making misrepresentations, we have every tool we need, rest assured. But in a case where someone's business plans have changed, it's not appropriate to without a basis, say that they're making a fraudulent statement the first time.
I guess the point is that you need the bar of willful, correct? So there is a much higher bar compared to policy.
Willful or blatantly obvious, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the tubes next.
Christoph Blecker from Walt Disney Company says he opposed the policy as written. There are other proposals that better address the desire for simplification. Totally open for reasonable discussion, but removing the need for basic documented proof of use and replacing it with officer attestation isn't reasonable in my opinion.
Thank you. Senator, microphone.
Hi, Amy Potter, Hilka Streambank. I'm concerned about the implication of the potential increase of fraud on other IP address buyers in the market. So right now we already have a situation where there's a problem with some registration hijacking going on, and that's making the job of organizations that are out there trying to purchase IP addresses more difficult because they have to engage in an increasing amount of diligence, and when this space is already in the name of an organization in ARIN's database, if you have to question whether or not there was some sort of fraud going on there, that makes your life really difficult, and I think that there are other ways of addressing the needs issue that doesn't add this extra problem for people trying to participate in the market in a legitimate way.
Are you in support then or against this policy?
I'm against it.
Against, thank you. Next speaker, Senator microphone.
Hi, Chris Tassett Law, ARIN AC. I'm wondering, the community, seems to be polarized in talking about this. Some are for, some are against. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to consider this in a more nuanced way. That is to say, use some sort of materiality threshold based on the size of the transfer should drive the degree of diligence that's required. Is it really an all or nothing situation? The other thing is perhaps converting the attestations to sworn statements such that if they're false, it amounts to perjury might also be of assistance. Just a couple of thoughts.
Thank you. Just to note that the microphones actually are closed. I apologize for not stressing it after Kevin's comment, but they are closed. So, John, were you trying it? No? Okay. So, last microphone comment.
Just real quick, Julie Percival with Bureau of Labor Statistics, but I'm not here representing them. I'm here representing myself.
Okay.
From an economic point of view, I think that this policy or policies like it that allow for less restrictive requirements instead of more restrictive requirements on policy transfers, on IP address transfers, are going to keep people more involved in IPv4 addresses instead of moving to IPv6 addresses.
Thank you. Scott, any last, because sometimes there's a bit of a delay, nothing remote. Okay, the microphones are closed. Last comment if you want anything, Rob? No, thank you. Thank you to Rob then for his presentation then. I will engage our counters. The counters are ready. So it's the same question as before. Well, with the policy number changed, obviously. This is a recommended draft policy. We are talking about this policy specifically, so please consider that when deciding how to vote. Again, anybody in this room can or can hear me is free to support. So let's see if we can keep the same good numbers as we did last time. Those that are in favor of the AC continuing to advance this policy 2015-7, please raise your hand nice and high or indicate online at this time. Nice and high. Scott, that's not nice and high. Come on, there we go. You're at the head table. You got to set the... We want no hanging chads. What? No. Thank you. You may lower them. And those that are opposed, please raise your hand nice and high and keep it that way until I ask you to lower. Just another second. Thank you. All right, you may lower it. So, just reminders, we wait the results. If you want to continue to talk about this topic, please find an AC member at the break, at lunch. There's table topics for some of these policy proposals we're discussing and otherwise. So a policy breakout room that you can, on this or any topic. Then yes, there is a table topic on this specific policy, so if you didn't feel like you got a comment in or you'd like in a slightly more casual setting, please find that table at lunch. All right, I see the results making their way down the thing. So, on the matter of ARIN 2015-7, yes, I can speak. Simplified requirements for demonstrated need for IPv4 transfers. Number in the room, 137. Those in favor, 12. Those against, 35. This input will be provided to the AC for their consideration. Thank you. I'll turn it back to John. Thank you, everybody.